Yeah, yeah. I'll look again. Share screen. Yeah, and I'm choosing it. I've got it. Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm sharing. Oh, they should see it now. Full screen slide. Okay. Yes, I have chosen it. Okay, I'll stop video.
English, 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 English.
The interpreters can't interpret. The microphone is not working, sorry.
I'm hearing you, okay?
Oh, yes, I can hear you, Jeffrey. Clear and nice. But I can hear the Russian speakers.
Ah, I see, okay.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I'm glad to welcome you at the working session called Modeling and Forecasting of PPP Projects. My name is Arthur Sheglov. I'm a managing partner of Noterion Group and also the coordinator. And allow me to introduce our highly esteemed colleagues. Some of them are present face-to-face here in the studio. Some will connect remotely. First and foremost, Jeffrey Sider, Vice President and consultant of WSP Canada, Andrei Kuchkin, head of strategic planning of Avtodor State Company, Dmitry Petrovsky, deputy general manager on traffic planning, Maestro Region, and our great friend Yuri Ilitsky, executive director of CINAR, City Traffic Solutions. A highly representative composition of the audience. Since we have some shift in the agenda, please be as brief as possible, but very clear, and a very short introduction. Modeling and forecasting is of key importance when implementing planning and implementing PPP projects, either as PPP or concession agreements. Traffic planning impacts not only the preparation of these projects and the calculation of the economic effectiveness of these projects, but also the political career of many state officials who launch such projects. This has to be taken into account when selecting the right contractor, the right strategy, and the right projects. Traffic model is a point of attraction for many stakeholders. As we see now, communications play more and more role in traffic planning because not only professionals and the experts of the industry pay attention to traffic models and their state customers, but also urbanists, active citizens, and future users of these facilities, or just the population who live in the area where the project is implemented. You have to know how to communicate with the stakeholders, including during the preparation stage of the traffic model and the project itself. Today's event will be built as follows. First, we're going to listen to our esteemed experts, and then if we have time, I will ask you questions. I'd like to start with Jeffrey Sider, Vice President from WSP Canada. Canada is one of the leaders, by the way, global leaders in terms of implementing PPP projects, private-public partnership. And I like a story about the pension fund of teachers of Ontario who have assets, structural assets all over the world. And their interests are very broad. If you look at their portfolio, I think Elon Musk is lagging behind. So let's start. Jeffrey, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? Do you see my screen?
Yes, we can see you.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. I thank you again for inviting me to join this session. I have a long association with Russia and doing projects across Russia with PPPs. I'm Jeffrey Seid. I'm head of the advisory for WSP. We're a global company with offices in, my screen doesn't want to change. Apologies for that. We're a company of about 56,000 professional engineering and design employees. We have approximately 550 offices in 45 countries. We have a revenue of over $8.5 billion in 2020. We are ranked by the Engineering News Record, ENR, as the top international design firm. We're also ranked as #1 in transportation, and we're ranked as #1 in mass transit and rail. We're actually #2 in the world in maritime. We focused on 6 key business areas: transportation, environment, energy, resources, and industry, property and buildings, and infrastructure. And of course, advisory. I head up the global advisory business for WSP. And the largest part of our business is also transportation in advisory, as well as transportation in design. So more than 50% of our business is in the transportation sector. In terms of advisory, my group specializes in pre-development planning and strategy, financing and transactions, asset management, fleet electrification and optimization planning. We're also specialized in the PPP programs. We do strategic PPP planning and development. We do project financing, value for money analyses, procurement and transaction structuring, and very importantly, risk financing and technical pre-feasibility. As we'll discuss, risk is the key component of effective costing of these public-private partnerships. And one of the issues that we find globally is the reason for people questioning the effectiveness of public-private partnerships. In terms of our involvement, and these are projects that I've personally been involved in as well. We are in all sectors of infrastructure, roads and highways. We've done projects in Canada, USA, Bangladesh, Turkey, Australia, Puerto Rico. We have transit projects around the world. You see from the slide, over $25 billion of transit projects that we completed using public-private partnership models, pretty much globally, from rail, light rail and metro, through to freight rail, high-speed rail, bus and BRT, port and maritime. We're doing work in Russia as well in terms of the electrification of bus initiatives and transitioning to alternative powertrains. We have airports, about $5 to $6 billion worth of airport work, both landside as well as airside. We are currently doing P3 airports across Canada. We have work in the Caribbean, in South America, and in Europe and Eastern Europe. Institutional buildings, we've done embassies. I was responsible for the development of the Canadian embassy in Moscow, but we do embassies. A lot of the Canadian embassies, the flagship embassies, are done by way of public-private partnership structures. Transit stations, trade centers, performing arts centers, broadcast centers, and hospitals. And then very importantly, municipal infrastructure, water and wastewater. Just looking at the global infrastructure deficit and getting more into the costing component of this work, there's been a growing urbanization in around the world. This growth globally impacts capacity, it impacts pricing, it impacts the interest of key industry players in terms of how to get the A team involved in these projects and how to attract inbound investment into the jurisdiction that one is working, be it in Russia, be it in Ecuador. So we know that India, China, Nigeria account for a significant portion of the $2.5 billion increase in urbanization in emerging markets, coupled with huge public debt, demand for public services, renewal is deficient. There's been this global pandemic, and so there's this enormous demand for investment into infrastructure. The challenge is to make this investment viable from an economic and standpoint, from the public sector's viewpoint, and from the private sector's viewpoint, to be financially viable. Mature markets, Russia, USA, Canada, Australia, there's aging inventory. We have increasingly increasing needs from additional demand. There's limited funding. The result is that there's a global gap of about $57 trillion in investment required into infrastructure development and renewal, and traditional funding simply can't keep pace with it. So we're seeing a lot more pressure to move to public-private partnerships. We're also seeing from the private side a lot more pressure. A lot more of the companies are saying we're not prepared to take on the additional risk that the public agencies are pushing to try transfer under PPP projects. So there's this, we're at a turning point in the industry of changing from the fine balance between transferring risk and retaining risk. The key issue is that countries cannot expect to have an A+ economy, to have a top-notch economy with D+ infrastructure. So you really need to see that your infrastructure is renewed, is effective, and is continuing to keep pace with demand. Basically, the four guiding principles in meeting this deficit. Number one is you need to meet government priorities. So it's fine having a public-private partnership, but you really need to see that we're meeting government priorities: job creation, trade facilitation, inbound investment, etc. We need to ensure that there's growth and development, so it's economic transformation, sustainability and accountability, and knowledge transfer. So when one's pricing these initiatives under a PPP model, we need to see that we meet these government priorities. And in terms of why public-private partnerships, they can be structured to achieve three uncertainties: cost certainty, the schedule certainty, and scope certainty. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for certainty when we go into a public-private partnership. In doing so, one focuses on risk transfer. The key to understanding risk is how to price it, how to manage it, and how to understand it. So understanding, managing, and mitigation of risk, and ensuring against risk. One of the big challenges in North America is that contractors are using insurance as a source of revenue because they're not appropriately pricing the risk. Similarly, governments are not appreciating the risk and understanding the risk and the inherent consequences of assigning risks to parties that are not best positioned to manage these risks. The result is that we're looking at alternative models to PPPs, such as alliance contracting and integrated project delivery models, which simply do not solve the conundrum of the financing. So we haven't yet found an alternative to public-private partnerships because they provide that financing, and the financing helps ensure that there is going to be a cost certainty, price certainty, a scope certainty in the delivery of these projects. As we know, the transfer of risk increases with the more complex models, but so does the sophistication of the marketplace. The fact of the matter is that companies are focusing a lot more on risk and the management thereof before they bid on these projects and before they look and actually entertain going into these public-private partnerships. Companies are looking for two things. They want to know that there's certainty on risk when they bid on these projects, and they want to look at the risk of getting repatriation of their profits, the repatriation of their capital investment. So the challenge is that there are many projects around the world, many opportunities, that when a public agency is putting together a risk with a strategy, putting together the strategy of going to markets on a P3, one of the important factors to consider is the fact that they are in competition with other agencies around the world, because bidders have the opportunity. They have to make a choice of bidding in St. Petersburg, or bidding in Toronto, bidding in New York, or bidding in Moscow, for example. From a public-private project standpoint, we have found in our research and experiences that the top 10 risks account for approximately 80% of the risk transfer. So we look at all of the top 10 risks. We can expect that 80% of the risk that's transferred will be captured in 10 risks. So when you're looking at pricing a project, understand what are those top 10 risks and where to focus one's energy. So the other factor is that the top 3 risks typically account for about 40% of the risk transfer. And typically asset residual, that is end of term risks, are usually one of the most critical of these risks. So the problem is that when people are going into and pricing these PPPs, they very seldom look at the handback conditions and how to manage handback. And that's the value at the end of the term of the concession. So top 10 risks, 80% of risk transfer. Top 3 risks is typically around about 40%. In terms of common causes of failure, we found that from a program perspective, so the previous slide I was looking at project risks, this slide I'm looking at program risks. From a program perspective, corruption, poor planning, inappropriate risk allocation, lack of support from the line ministry, lack of public stakeholder support, and insufficient capacity in the private sector will create an uncertainty, and the challenge for the public sector in pursuing these public-private partnerships is to reduce the inherent and collective uncertainty between the public and the private sector. So just looking at a couple of examples. Sorry, I'm not hearing the translation.
Jeffrey,
you
the
only
moderator
have 2
said that
minutes to go. You have to
only
finish
4
your
minutes left.
presentation.
Yeah, I'll be 2 minutes. What I want to just show is that there's a conceptual capital structure. One of the things to understand, if I look at the Ottawa Light Rail project that we recently did, that was a $2.2 billion transaction. Public funding was about $1.6 billion, with private equity at about $500 million. The private capital of that, the equity side, private capital put in $75 million, and debt financing was $400 million. Of the total of the $75 million, they're achieving a 30 to 40% typical annual returns on these. So for $2.2 billion, private capital is investing $75 million and getting a 40% return. The challenge is that when we account for risks, we can be looking at delay risks of around $250 and $1,000 per day or higher. That can build up as these risks come to the forefront. So in looking at the modeling for the example that I'm using, the project company had a $2.2 billion cost, and that's in understanding the risk, understanding where that risk is and what is going to impact the 40% return is key to this. So in terms of lessons learned, we have to plan for the whole life of this project. We have to acknowledge that it's not only about money, it's about economic returns to the public side, and it's about financial returns to the private side. We have to it's very important to have a bidder, a contractor that has a very strong balance sheet to support these projects. The public agency must be open for business. And finally, you need to be ready for the opportunity. There's considerable upfront planning is required. There's no shortcut to the upfront planning. With that, I'm going to say thank you. I'm happy to host any questions after this. And again, thank you for inviting me to this forum.
Thank you very much, Jeffrey.
It's my pleasure.
Dear colleagues, are there questions for Jeffrey? Jeffrey is still with us. Jeffrey, we'll be glad if you stay on for our further discussion. And now I would like to turn to our colleague, Andrei Kurichkiv, head of the Department of Investment and Strategic Planning of the state-owned company, Autodoor. Autodoor works on the largest federal projects, traffic projects, road projects, and also of this company as the public customer. What's your take on traffic modeling? Which aspects and implications are most important for you? I'm glad to welcome you all at the conference. This is very interesting. This is a very interesting topic. I think we should, by joint efforts, develop transport planning. I'll tell you about the way we identify the choice of the projects within the frameworks of PPP, public-private partnership. First, about state-owned company. In trust management, we have got about 3,000 kilometers of motorways, about 50% or 1,700 kilometers are in toll roads. By 2024, we'll increase the amount of toll roads up to 300,000, and more than 4.5 thousand kilometers will be in trust management. Next slide, please. All our projects, or at least most part of them, are implemented on the basis of public-private partnership. Some chunk of funds is provided by the government, and also it's equity funding. We implemented 16 projects totaling more than 800 billion rubles. More than 200 of those were done within, the funds were raised within equity investments. All the projects are implemented on the basis of public-private partnership, and money which we take, we should return them. So we should be very careful about the revenues for each project, and the risks in forecasting traffic and revenues is very high. If we end up making a mistake, we'll never have a return on the investment. That would be very bad for the Russian Federation, because this is like a loan, money should be paid back. Further on in the presentation, I'll fill in on the way traffic simulation model is expediting our activities. Currently, we have got a clear-cut and explicit mechanism of project screening, project selection. We have got our internal instruments. It's a uniform traffic model of motorways of Russia. We update it once yearly, do the calibration, and on the basis of this traffic model, first we look for most promising directions whereby very interesting and lucrative projects might be. At the next stage, we start pre-feed. The pre-feed stage, take the most attractive sites and develop them. First, we develop traffic model. We substantiate the selection of routes. It's the development of traffic model, then financial and organization model, risk analysis, international and domestic audit, and together with the federal executive authorities, we discuss, we substantiate the necessity of the project after feasibility study, of course. It's one of the projects. It's Moscow, Nizhny Novgorod, Kazan, the project which is taken on board within the transport, the highway road, high-speed highway, just motorway, Moscow, Kazan, as part of Europe Western China project. We have got our in-house standard within which we have explicit prescriptions of what our contractors should do to develop the forecast of traffic intensity and revenues. We describe all that in great details in terms of reference. First stage, source data collection. For example, traffic intensity within the forecast of intensity of Moscow, Kazan motorway, about 600 different measurements of intensity were made. We studied flows on all the alternative motorways and sections of the road network. We conduct public opinion polls for this project in particular in different periods. We surveyed more than 15,000 users with identifying major correspondences, willingness to pay, and behavior patterns depending on tariff policies and other parameters. Alternative networks. We need that in order to construct the graph of the network, which would really reflect real situation on a motorway. We do not confine ourselves to analysis of major profiles only. Also, we analyze the strategies of the regions and zones through which this project will cut through. Precise with our forecast. We compile macroeconomic parameters as well. Traffic zones in our models always correspond to administrative territorial subdivision of settlements, rural areas. We collect actual statistic, retrospective statistic, and come up with a forecast for traffic intensity for each region. Geographic region, I mean. And after that, we develop model of base year model. It's standard. We use PZOOM software for transport traffic simulation model. As for this base year model, we have got our own requirements for the quality. When contractor their quality, then we gear towards the stage of forecasting. When we have got base year simulation model, we select the route. When we contemplated Europe and Western China, we contemplated several options for routes via transport model. We selected the most most economical route. And we selected the systems of tolling and tariff policies. That is the end of pre-feed. stage. We select the route, we prepare financial model, and then we provide for the feasibility study the federal executive authorities. But we go further than that in traffic modeling because we're aware that since the pre-feed stage to prepare and feed the road construction, might take several years. Life goes on, many things might change. So we update this traffic model, financial model, we embed certain risks into it, that traffic might slump or hike, whatever. We work with tariff policies, traffic modeling, follows up the project from the very idea which is pitched, and then pre-commissioning, commissioning operations, tariff policies. We keep getting in touch with the users. We know what they want and so on, to tariff policies as well. That about wraps it up. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Andre. You know something as to public-private partnership projects, majority of them, they have got one downside. It's difficult to do the feasibility study from the economic standpoint as well, because sometimes model could be more expensive vis-a-vis public procurement systems. So why PPP? And you've demonstrated it very clearly how we should do the feasibility study. It's public opinion polls, regular forecasting, and simulation models, and everything you do throughout the life cycle of the project. Andre, you mentioned Musk Kazan. It's not PPP model, as far as I remember. I think it was related to the fact that you would like to speed up the process. PPP is a fabulous story, but rather lengthy in pre-feed stage, preparation stage, inception. What are we to expect from the concession from Autodor state-owned company? We have got our own strategy for the development of high-speed motorways. Shortly, it will be officially endorsed and approved, and you all will get to know and see which motorways will be building and developing on the basis of concessions. We have got very ambitious plans. Until 2030, we'll construct another 2,000 kilometers of motorways, and I think that we'll use PPP in that, and concession agreements as well. Yes, well, you keep us in suspense. This is a big intrigue. Okay, we'll keep track of the documents when they will be published. Let's shift from transport to public transport. Let's discuss trams, streetcars, as Americans say. Dmitry Petrovsky, Deputy CEO on traffic planning of Almaty region, Movista Regions Group. Good afternoon, Dmitry. Tell us, please, about planning of public use transport when you're preparing session project. Dear colleagues, I'll highlight the major things. A concession per se recommended itself as very expedient and potent tool of public-private partnership also in the sphere of public transport. And as a rule, typical concession is concluded for infrastructural type of transport like EVs. Looking back to 10 or 12 years back from now, in Russia, there's the trend of scaling down the passenger flows in electrical transport. 10 or 12 years ago, about 45% of passengers were transported by electric vehicles. Now it's 33%. And in some times, cities, trams and even trolleybuses almost are extinct, so to put it. Major prerequisites for scaling down the share of this type of municipal transport is based on the aggregation of externalities and internal factors. Internal factors are about big depreciation of the infrastructure and rolling stock, low rates of their renewal due to a shortfall of funding, which of course impaired the reliability of this mode of transport passengers. On the other hand, as to external factors, is the growth of the number of private cars in the households, which means that there is the outflow of local residents from public transport and the increase of bus transportation, which often those are the overlaps, and there are lower headways as well in this movement. City electrical vehicles have got lots of advantages. Streetcar or a tram is most efficient. Massive high-speed transportation in city environment. Higher passenger capacity belongs to metro, to subway, or more expensive and not implementable elsewhere. Mindful of the global international experience of the same time span of 10 or 12 years, about eight new tramway lines were constructed, 22 out of them in Europe, more than 300 kilometers altogether. So globally, we can see that it has been developing as a mode of transport. And given sufficient funding, municipal electrical transport can grow and be on the rebound. For concession for city electric vehicles, we should use specific instruments of modeling. The process of modeling is consisting of many iterations. All of you present here, I guess you're familiar with this instrument and with those iterations. After the project has started, we develop an optimized network. Then we do traffic simulation model to identify the parameters of route network. Then two major stages are coming up. It's implementation, operation, and financial economic optimization. If we identify big deviations and digressions from the expected outcomes, we iterate that and repeatedly optimize route network if the outcome is possible after is positive, then there will be an application for public-private initiative. The parameters of traffic planning are done on a yearly basis, even at the investment stage. So we have got yearly growth or changes of passenger flows and redistribution of transportation between different modes of transport, like electrical vehicles. We reduce duplication of the routes and interchange of passengers from illegal gray zone, non-fixed tariff vehicles to reliable and fast electric modes of transport like trolley buses and tramways. Transport planning allows us to assess passenger flows of the city, identify the potential of growth, the use of municipal electric vehicles, and different park and ride systems, dedicated lanes on the road, and so on. For concession agreement, it's necessary for the outcomes of the work to be reflected in the documents of traffic planning in the municipality, the municipal administration. When we develop projects of the concession, the indispensable part is the assessment of investments into rolling stock and the infrastructure. Infrastructure is most costly, amounts up to 60% of all the costs and even more. mindful of the cost structure for infrastructure. Major investments for linear objects is the tracks and contact network, and about 30% contact objects, depot, parks, substations, and so on. That way, the needed amount of investments into rolling stock and other components. We do it on the basis of the assessment of infrastructure, its refurbishment, retrofitting, and development. Conclusion, I'm here to say that concession project say implementation is very proficient. Within short time horizon, it's possible to raise big funds. It's possible to enhance efficiency of infrastructure of transport modes and to receive social, ecological, and budget positive effects. But having said that, also the payments of grantor increases drastically the load upon municipal budget, which might make this project unimplementable. But the amount payment of grantor could be reduced when its concession agreement in the town need support of authorities of the local administrations. That's it. Thank you, colleagues. I'll take your questions, if any. Thank you very much. Congratulations. I know that you signed concession agreement on Upper Pushma. Upper Pushma. Great. You know everything about this project. Yes, I was involved. Dmitry, we have got different concession projects for public transport, which are considered transport system and for different sites. For example, if a concession covers only a part of the routes of the network, how do simulation modeling? We simulate the entire municipal network to get the right parameters for small sites of route network, or for a dedicated route, we have to assess the entire network to get valid parameters. So every time, even if it will be a small concession agreement on a small site, we would like the modeling of the entire traffic system. Well, it depends. Every time it depends. But of course, the best, there should be comprehensive integrated simulation modeling. But there are some instances, case-to-case basis is possible to have it only for a site. Like in Upper Pushma, the network was assessed, taken into account Yekaterinburg town, that branch up to, from Yekaterinburg up to Upper Pushma. Thank you very much, Dmitry. Municipal traffic solutions, these colleagues, they compete versus Movistar, or maybe they're not competing against each other. They are the drivers of success. They are forward-looking, they are visionaries. They set the tone for the this process. Russia, Yuri. Well, how you do it actually? I mean, when you embark upon concession planning or you embark upon traffic simulation model, do you take into account, first of all, mindful of the would-be concession agreement? Hello, everyone. What would I like to say? In point of fact, traffic modeling, those simulation models are about the neutral assessment, unbiased neutral investment assessment when it comes to public-private partnership. As we are moving forward the idea of implementation of large-scale projects in comprehensive development of electric transport using such vehicle as concession. I would like to dwell on concession. On the whole, concession is structured by investors as the costs, as the expenses. First of all, if we omit the issue of capital investments and capital costs, one of the basic components of costs is operational costs. It's very important to calculate in the right way operational costs on transportation, and they directly depend on transport modeling. Nowadays is such a trend in reality that municipal electric vehicles are run at a loss.
Unfortunately, the result is working at a loss because the infrastructure is outdated, the rolling stock is aged, and it is very slow. Hence, the question about how is it going to behave if everything is modernized? The only thing that may give an answer to this is correctly built traffic model, because traffic model is an analysis of the current situation and a comprehensive approach to the analysis of the technical status of the road network. The analysis, individual analysis of the quality of servicing of the population, and the independent evaluation of the route network. All this is the basis for future modeling. Based on our example, the regions with which we are working, the answer to what the traffic model is all about is partially an answer to the question, how long do you have to travel in kilometers per year to satisfy the demand? But then comes the question what the demand will be, and the answer to this is the traffic model. So the loop is closed. The correct traffic model, we see Symmetra company sitting here. They are one of our partners. We worked for Taganrog model together, and they've managed to answer our questions. They first and foremost confirmed our calculations in terms of operational expenses on the one hand, and on the other hand comes the revenue, which is balancing the expenses. The revenue that we receive from the fare is and it comes onto stage if the tram network is going to work at good quality and regularly and reliably. The forecasting of the tram model is a very important part of both partners to the concession. This is more an economic component that allows to correctly and reliably make a decision that such a project is really needed. May I ask you a question? What do you think? Do we need to raise the awareness about the traffic modeling? Do we have to work with public, raising their awareness about how and what things are being done, what the traffic models are being constructed, what complicated schemes we follow, etc. The public is not always prepared to listen to such technicalities. We very often come across such an understanding that we can speak only with the experts. The people from the room are not using the microphones, so this is not possible to interpret, sorry. Thank you, Vladimir. What about you, Yuri? I support this absolutely. And Vladimir is absolutely right that first and foremost, the professional experts have to work with the models, because the basis for future modeling is formed based on the initial data we collect for the model, because you can't just sit down and produce a traffic model on a clean sheet of paper. I understand that we have to conduct the questionnaires. There are special people who are using the rolling stock and measure the number of people who are using this transport. This is necessary to create a basis. Then we take the norms. For example, the norms on transport servicing. Because it is no secret that we have a very high level of doubling in terms of city electric transport, because the city authorities decided that since they cannot satisfy the needs because the transport is not is very often outdated, so they decided to double in order to raise the comfort level for the population. But this is not right. This is not a correct approach. We can't look at the city and say the tram is bad, it goes down, and we have motor vehicles instead. I think that the city electric transport, visually trams, is a priority transport that can secure the demand on the main routes, for the main routes. It is quite a comfortable mode of transport and has a very high transportation capacity. And when the system for the future traffic servicing is being formed, we have to demonstrate it to the public, because certainly we'll come across different questions, like people asking us, where is my fixed route bus? Fixed route taxi, sorry, why has it disappeared? So we have to raise the awareness of the public in terms of the effectiveness and reliability of this system, for them to see the benefits. Out of the microphone, can't be interpreted. Now, can you hear me? There is one nuance here in terms of interacting with public and the population, especially when we design such large systems. As of lately, in Copenhagen, a Circle line of metro has been launched, and it actually revolutionized the transport network of the city. And the work in terms of preparing the transportation network was as follows. First, the company that dealt with traffic design built a route network of land public transport, taking into account the new Circle metro line. And after that, the municipalities worked with all the feeding routes. And here, the interactions with each and every household, with each and every housewife or mom is of key importance. The key mistake in St. Petersburg, when a new traffic network is being presented, everything is being discussed with the public, but the main network has not been presented. So we mainly discuss the feeding routes without discussing the main routes. I think that was the key mistake, because there has to be a backbone first. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. And finishing our session, I may sum up what we've heard. When we speak about infrastructural projects, motor roads or public transport, we speak about communications. Transport communications, communications in planning, economic communications, financial, legal communications. And I would like to finish with the following. Let's communicate more. Let's understand each other more and promote great projects. That's the end of our session, and great thanks to all the speakers and the audience. Thank you.